Ancient man has always been preoccupied with the search for optimum health. This has been documented as far back as 5000 BCE. In ancient Egypt, there were two popular texts found on medical science known as the Smith and Ebers papyruses. These texts describe the Egyptian approach to health and express the concept that deviation from nature could end in catastrophic results. A young student named Plutarch, an initiate of the mystery school of Isis, reported that he followed a strict diet of fruits and vegetables, and that he abstained from pork, fish, and sheep. It was well understood that in order to achieve optimum health, one must first discover the keys to wellness in mind, body, and in spirit. The diet of indigenous peoples has gone through many changes over the centuries, and the variations can be traced as far back as ancient Nubia. The famous phrase, "Let food be thy medicine," coined by Imhotep, has been used by naturopaths for ages. Many Eastern civilizations shared a similar philosophy in their approach to food. These same principles are shared by the indigenous Chinese in the ancient Taoist cultures. The early Taoists believed diet to be extremely important to their health, particularly regarding the amount of qi, or ki, that was in the food. These spiritual aspirants practiced what is known as Bi-gu Shiki. This literally means avoid grain, eat energy. The Taoists believed that immortality could actually be achieved in this way, and they fought for decades against the onslaught of modern agricultural practices in hopes that they would maintain their lifestyle. Many ancient Taoists are rumored to be some of the oldest living humans on Earth, also known as immortals. It is said that they perceived food to be disruptive to the spirit, and that they could sustain themselves by simply absorbing this qi, or cosmic life force energy. Similar to their Olmec, Aztec, and Mayan ancestors, Native American people were also known to be extremely resourceful in using the ingredients readily available to them. They ate wild plants, they ate berries, they ate nuts and seeds, and they honored the lives of animals just as they did human life. And if they had to kill for consumption or for ceremony, they would ask the Creator for forgiveness, and they would honor the animal spirit. The native tradition was to take from Mother Earth only that which was needed, as it was seen as dishonorable to simply kill for sport. Over the last 20 years of my life, I've had this same burning question that I hadn't quite been able to shake, and that is, how is it that the same people who taught the world about natural remedies, fasting, and created cuisine out of wild plants and herbs somehow today lead the world in food-related death and disease? Now, don't get me wrong, I am clear that there are levels to this, more complex than anything I can express in these few minutes I have with you today. But my position is that through the process of colonization, that not only did we lose our land, our heritage, and our freedom, but also our food. That we've traded our fruit trees and ancient grains for white sugar, corn, and wheat. That through this process, we've somehow lost the appreciation for our indigenous sun-ripened foods, and that we grew a preference for the food of our oppressors. I realize that this new way of eating has left us nutritionally depleted, and that though we often sometimes suffer from obesity, we are actually starving. It was around this time that I realized the stronghold that modern junk foods had on me and my peers. This burning question I had led me towards my own plant-based journey at just 18 years old, and I went on to become a colon therapist at the age of 24. I was determined to rid my body of all the toxic foods I had ingested throughout my youth. and to return back to the simple and natural diet of my grandmother's kitchen and my grandfather's garden. I was born and raised in Oklahoma City, where I moved back and forth between my parents' home in the city and the countryside where my grandparents lived. My family was a combination of Choctaw, Cherokee, and Black freedmen who had been scattered all over the state for at least 7 generations. Most of what I ate at Granny's house came from her garden or from the bushes surrounding her home. She worked as a nurse by day, and she took care of her family at night. And today, Granny has fought cancer twice, and at 85 years old, Grandma Billy is still alive and kicking. But as a young woman, I didn't appreciate the value of my grandmother's traditional meals and her gardening lifestyle. But I did notice how my city-fied, store-bought produce tasted nothing like my grandfather's savory tomatoes and his sweet strawberries. I noticed how the peppers that used to ripen for weeks on my grandmother's counter, now they grew fur after just a few days on mine. In fact, I took pictures of this, and I used it for one of my first social memes that stated, "Could mold be the cousin of cancer?" In the caption I wrote, "Age gracefully like the organic pepper, ripe, wrinkled, but still juicy on the inside, still edible." You know what I'm saying? But today, we hardly even know where our food comes from or how it's produced. This is why it's so important to support your local farmers, farmers that you can trust to provide quality foods, or even better, as my 2012 campaign meme stated, fight the power and grow some. Well, I also said, friends don't let friends eat at Waffle House, but that didn't go over too well. But having locally sourced foods from ethical growers has become more and more relevant as we've learned that the genetic modification of food is intrinsically dangerous and often has irreversible effects, as it must first disrupt the natural intelligence of the plant to which it is applied. This process creates a host of damaging side effects, some yet to be discovered. When I started the Chef Ahki Brand in 2008, the average veggie blogger didn't look like me. And the few that existed, they definitely had that tree-hugging, hairy armpit patchouli thing going on, you know what I'm saying? Like, not swag. But over time, folks got a little more creative, more exotic, even got sexy with the veggies. But that wasn't my style either. I wanted to introduce this new budding social media world to plant-based foods. Plant-based foods in a more swagged out kind of way, more upscale, more sophisticated. And today I'm proud to say I think I did a pretty amazing job. But I also realize that processed foods, most people don't realize how deeply and intrinsically unhealthy they really are. With my blog, I wanted to appeal to Black and brown people worldwide, those who forgot about the healing, magical powers of nature and all the tasty and medicinal things that we could create if we just put our minds to it. With my blog, I really wanted to speak to my audience. I knew them, I was them. I released my first published book in 2015 titled Electric. In this book, I described using the 4 elements as a roadmap towards wellness. The premise of this book was to express the idea that humans were essentially electrical in nature and therefore need alkaline foods to best nourish their bodies. This is especially true for the indigenous biology. When you look at diet from an ethnogenetic perspective, you'll find something really interesting about how foods affect our anatomical and physiological makeup over time. Specifically, when those same ethnogenetic groups are separated from their ancestral foods. The adverse effects are innumerable and ultimately lead to nutritional disaster. In the author's note, I wrote, "I'm not eating salad, I'm eating sunlight." I used this quote to describe the phototrophic nature of people of color and how, much like plants use the process of photosynthesis, we also synthesize sunlight into nutrition. And yes, this is science. Indigenous peoples have more melanin. The sunlight makes a hormone called cholecalciferol, which makes vitamin D. Vitamin D synthesizes proteins to make dense bones for strong skeletal structure, fast twitch hormones for speed, physical strength, and endurance. It increases immunity through the production of hormones and antibodies by the thyroid and parathyroid. And it increases metabolism and melanin. But due to cultural degradation, colorism, and fear, people of color often avoid the sun altogether. This inspired one of my very first blog posts titled, "Take your black ass outside and get some sun." I know, but did you know that humans share a large percent of the same DNA as plants? This means that we also share a common destiny. Humans can't live without the nutrients from plants. In fact, plants have the one molecule used for energy and cellular respiration, glucose, also known as carbohydrates, found specifically in plants and their fruits. We are far removed now from the days where we spent most of our time outdoors, when trees covered much more of the earth, providing the precious and life-giving oxygen that we all need. And at this very moment, we are losing thousands of trees due to industrialization and climate change, greed and capitalism. This has devastating results on the quality of air that we breathe, and it greatly affects all of us. And then there's Mother Water. In perfect balance with the earth, humans are made up of 80% water. We are taught to drink 8 glasses of water a day to stay hydrated. But are we really absorbing all that water? My grandmother drank water from a well in her backyard, and my mother and I were raised on mostly city tap. The average city tap water contains a host of pollutants and toxic chemicals not fit for human consumption, like lead, chlorine, and mercury. Today, most of our water comes from plastic bottles laced with BPA, an estrogen-mimicking toxin known to cause cancer. This chemical was found in 96% of children recently tested. Could this be why so many baby boomers are now outliving their children? Or why we're seeing diseases most commonly found in the elderly showing up in much younger ages? Let's face it, the standard American diet isn't working for any of us. But this is especially true for Black and brown people. When we look at nature closely, we'll see that all creatures have a divine and cosmic arrangement, and that just like the animal kingdom, our natural habitats provide us with the things we most need to live and thrive. In the scientific sense, when you look at a culture, for example, it is a substance that thrives when it's in its natural environment, an environment that is conducive to its cellular condition and consistent with its biology. Humans aren't much different, and in our quest for wellness, we must first choose foods that work in harmony with our genetic predisposition. Today's medical establishments, allopathic and naturopathic, do not recognize biological variants. And their approach to therapy is typically a one-size-fits-all. As a wellness coach, I have counseled hundreds of families who have compromised their health with the help of physicians who have little to no knowledge about nutrition and its abilities to prevent illness. This has been the inspiration for my platform. And in collaboration with local growers who use sustainable methods, I'm hopeful that we can start the process of restoration of our indigenous plant systems and the education of our health workers, that I can somehow spark the interest of just one future biochemist who will expand the conversation about nutritional biodiversity in the laboratory and in the educational systems. I encourage us all to look to the wisdom of the elders as they hold the keys to our health and longevity. And what I must say to you, human family, brothers and sisters, is that you are not sick. You are exhausted. You are malnourished. You are nutritionally depleted, minerally deficient, and severely dehydrated. That your health is ultimately your responsibility. Not the government, not the schools, but you. I encourage you to get back in the garden like your forefathers, to grab your apron, grab your babies, and to prepare meals together once again. This is the way to build true culture, relationships, and strong, healthy families. It is with this intent that I've joined you today. Thank you.